The night had never felt so wide, so suffocating. Inside the sprawling Ikoyi mansion, silence ruled like a tyrant. The kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, but heavy, pressing against the skin, crawling into the ears, making every heartbeat sound too loud. Funk sat on the edge of her bed, the silk of her nightgown clinging to her body, her bare feet resting on the cold marble floor. The king-sized bed stretched vast and empty behind her, the sheets untouched on one side. In her trembling hands, she clutched the pregnancy test, the thin white stick that had become both her tormentor and judge. Negative. She didn't cry at first. She had forgotten how to. But when she glanced at the antique wall clock, its ticking loud against the stillness, something inside her broke. The tears came hot and unstoppable, running down her cheeks and onto her lap. She pressed a palm against her flat stomach and whispered, her voice raw with exhaustion. "Why me?" Downstairs, life went on as if her despair was invisible. The faint clinking of wine glasses drifted from the dining hall, followed by laughter, the cruel kind that pretended to be innocent. Tonight, like so many nights, her husband's family gathered for dinner, and she was expected to join them. But Funk couldn't face it. Not tonight. Not with that stick in her hand. Through the polished mahogany doors, she could hear her mother-in-law's voice, sharp as glass. 10 years. 10 whole years, and not even a child to show for it. My son is wasting his youth on a barren woman. Laughter rippled around the table. Someone added, maybe she should step aside. Let another woman give us an heir. Funk pressed her hand to her mouth to stop the sob that wanted to escape. She curled forward, as though folding herself into nothing might make her disappear. The house was a palace, yet she felt like a prisoner inside it. High walls guarded the property, iron gates sealed her from the city, and yet none of that grandeur could protect her from the humiliation that pierced her every day. Her husband, Femi, was nowhere to be found. He never was. The last time he had touched her was 3 years ago, a brief, perfunctory encounter that ended with him rolling away before she could even reach for him. Since then, he had grown more distant, retreating into his business trips and his mistresses. He didn't even bother to hide them anymore. Tabloids occasionally hinted at his escapades, but the family buried the stories with their wealth and influence. Funk was left with nothing but the echoes of an empty marriage bed and the weight of society's expectations pressing down on her shoulders. She rose to her feet and moved to the window. From there, she could see the vast compound below, bathed in the pale glow of security lights. The manicured lawn, the luxury cars parked neatly, the pool shimmering faintly. And beyond it all, by the iron gate, stood Kunnel, the gate man. He was leaning casually against the wall, his posture relaxed yet alert, the muscles in his arms visible even beneath his faded security uniform. He was young, late 20s, perhaps early 30s, dark-skinned, strong, with the kind of quiet presence that seemed to belong more to the earth than to the polished marble world she lived in. Funk found herself staring longer than she meant to. Kunnel shifted slightly, his eyes lifting toward the mansion. For the briefest moment, their gazes locked across the distance. And in that instant, something passed between them, something she couldn't name, but felt deep inside. The next morning came heavy with routine. Funk moved through the mansion like a ghost, greeting staff, avoiding her in-laws. Her husband had left early as usual without a word. At breakfast, her mother-in-law's cold eyes studied her. "You didn't come down last night," the older woman said, voice laced with accusation. "I wasn't feeling well," Funk murmured, staring into her tea. The woman's lips tightened. A wife's first duty is to her husband. A second is to her family. You fail at both. The words cut deep, but Funk had learned to endure them. She excused herself quickly and fled outside, needing air. The garden was quiet. She walked among the flowers, letting her fingers brush the petals, trying to find some peace. It was then she noticed Kunnel again. He was trimming the hedge by the gate, sweat glistening on his skin under the morning sun. When he saw her, he paused, wiping his brow. "Good morning, madam," he said, voice low and respectful. Something in his tone, gentle, almost concerned, made her chest tighten. She nodded, managing a small smile. "Good morning, Kunnel." That was all. A simple exchange. But it lingered with her long after she returned inside. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. It was another family dinner, another round of humiliation. This time, her husband's younger cousin made a joke about her womb being a guest house with no tenants. The table roared with laughter. Even Femi smirked faintly, sipping his wine. Funk excused herself, her body shaking with rage and shame. She didn't go upstairs this time. She walked straight out into the night, barefoot, her silk gown dragging against the stone path. By the gate, Cunnel straightened as he saw her approach. "Madam, are you all right?" he asked softly. Her vision blurred with tears. She shook her head, unable to form words. He stepped closer, concern etching his features. "Do you need water? Should I call Oga?" "No," she cut him off, her voice trembling. "Don't call him. Don't." Her breath hitched. For a long moment, they simply stood there, the night air heavy around them, the sound of Lagos traffic faint in the distance. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and pressed her lips to his. It was clumsy at first, desperate. Her tears mingled with the kiss, her hands clutching his shirt as though he was the only solid thing in her collapsing world. For a moment, he froze, shocked. Then something inside him shifted, and he kissed her back. The heat between them was instant, overwhelming. His hands cupped her face, then slid down to her waist, pulling her closer. She gasped against his mouth, her body awakening in ways it hadn't in years. "Madam," he whispered against her lips, breath ragged. "This is wrong." But neither of them stopped. He led her into the small guest house by the side of the compound, where staff sometimes rested. The room was dim, smelling faintly of wood polish and soap. She pressed him against the wall, her hunger consuming her. Their clothes came off in frantic movements, each piece discarded like the years of loneliness she had carried. Her nightgown slipped to the floor, leaving her trembling under his gaze. For the first time in a decade, she felt desired. Not pitied, not judged, desired. Their bodies collided in a rush of need, the sounds of their moans filling the small room. His touch was rough yet tender, his kisses burning trails down her skin. She clung to him, whispering broken fragments, "Don't stop. I need this. I need you." And when he finally entered her, she cried out, not just from pleasure, but from release. A release of years of frustration, humiliation, loneliness. Every thrust drove the pain out, replacing it with fire, with life. When it was over, she collapsed against him, her body shaking. He held her silently, his chest rising and falling beneath her cheek. Neither spoke of what had just happened. They didn't need to. The silence between them said it all. This was forbidden, dangerous. Yet neither of them regretted it. In the days that followed, Funk told herself it had been a mistake, a one-time lapse. But the truth clawed at her every night. She couldn't stop thinking of his hands, his lips, the way he had made her feel alive again. And so, one evening when the house was empty, she found herself outside again. Found herself drawn to him. Found herself unable to resist. This time, it wasn't clumsy. It was slow, deliberate, hungry. He kissed her like he had been waiting for her, like every second without her had been torture. She let him undress her gently, their bodies fitting together as though they had always belonged. They made love on the couch of the guest house, the old cushions creaking under their weight. She rode him, her hair falling around her face, her moans spilling freely into the night. He gripped her hips, guiding her rhythm, his own voice rough with desire. It wasn't just sex. It was rebirth. And afterward, when they lay tangled together, she whispered, "I just need to know I'm not empty inside." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. From that night onward, the mansion felt different. It was as if the walls themselves had absorbed the secret Funk carried, the taste of forbidden desire lingering in the air like perfume. She moved with a new energy. Her walk had a rhythm, her eyes a spark. Even the housemaids whispered among themselves, saying, "Madame Day glow these days." At family dinners, when the usual barbs were thrown her way, she didn't shrink anymore. She would sip her wine calmly, smile faintly, and let their words dissolve against her newfound armor. Her mother-in-law noticed. "Something has changed in you," the woman said one evening, suspicion lacing her tone. Funk only smiled. "If only you knew." The truth was she had become addicted to the fire Connell lit inside her. Each time they met in the small guest house, she felt herself shed another layer of despair. Their trysts were reckless, on the couch, against the wall, sometimes even on the polished floor, but every encounter deepened her hunger. Connell at first had tried to resist. He would shake his head saying, "Madam, this is dangerous. If Olga finds out," but the words always crumbled the moment she kissed him. He was no longer just the gate man. In those hours, he was her salvation. It was raining heavily the night of their third meeting. Thunder rolled over Lagos, the sky split by lightning. The mansion's marble halls echoed with emptiness. Femi had gone to Abuja for business, leaving Funk alone with her longing. She stood by the window, watching Connell struggle with the gates against the storm, his shirt plastered to his chest. Her pulse quickened. Moments later, she found herself running barefoot across the lawn, the rain soaking her gown, plastering it to her curves. He turned as she approached, surprise in his eyes. "Madam, you'll catch cold." She silenced him with a kiss, rain mingling with their lips, their bodies pressed against the iron gate. Within minutes, they were inside the gatehouse, dripping wet, clothes clinging to skin. She pulled his shirt over his head, her hands roaming hungrily over his chest. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the narrow bed in the corner. The storm outside became their soundtrack. The rain drummed against the roof, thunder punctuated their moans, lightning illuminated their bodies moving together in raw passion. For Funk, it was not just pleasure. It was proof she was alive. Proof she was still a woman, desired, fertile. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, the storm easing to a gentle drizzle. She traced circles on his chest, whispering, "Do you know what they call me? Barren. But I will show them I am not empty. I will prove it." Connell kissed her forehead softly. He said nothing, but his silence was heavy with understanding. Yet, with each stolen night, guilt clawed deeper. Funk would lie awake after their encounters, staring at the ceiling of her bedroom, the scent of him still on her skin. She imagined the scandal if anyone discovered the truth. The whispers in church pews, the tabloids screaming headlines, her in-laws crucifying her. And worse, the look on her husband's face. Not that he cared for her anymore, but the shame of being betrayed by his wife with a mere gate man would destroy him. Still, the hunger inside her refused to be silenced. Each time she swore it was the last, but when the loneliness returned, when the cruelty of her family pressed against her again, she found herself at the gatehouse. Their bodies became fluent in each other's language. She knew the way his breath hitched when she bit his shoulder, the way his grip tightened when she whispered his name. He learned the places on her skin that made her shudder, the rhythm that made her cry out. It was dangerous, reckless, intoxicating. Weeks turned into months. Funk's body began to change. Subtly at first, her skin brighter, her laughter freer, her appetite sharper. She would catch her reflection in the mirror and see a woman she barely recognized, alive, radiant, hopeful. At church one Sunday, one of her husband's friends leaned close and said, "Madam, you are glowing these days. Something good is happening." She only smiled. Inside, she carried a secret bigger than any jewel. Connell noticed it too. "You look different," he told her one afternoon, running his fingers through her hair as she lay on his chest. "Maybe because I feel different," she replied softly. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream. She imagined cradling a baby in her arms, imagined the looks on her in-laws' faces when they realized she had given the family the heir they longed for. The thought made her heart race with both fear and triumph. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Funk first noticed. She sat at her vanity, pen in hand, marking the dates on her calendar. Her period was late. At first, she dismissed it as stress. But when another week passed, and then another, her hands began to tremble. Could it be? Her heart pounded as she drove herself to a pharmacy on the mainland, disguised under a scarf and sunglasses. She bought the test with shaky fingers, her voice barely audible. Back at the mansion, she locked herself in the bathroom. The world outside faded, the ticking clock, the chirping birds, the hum of traffic. All that existed was the thin white stick in her hand. Minutes felt like hours. She closed her eyes, whispered a prayer, and looked. 2 bold lines. Positive. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The room spun, her knees weak. Tears spilled down her cheeks, this time not of despair, but of overwhelming relief. She pressed both hands against her stomach, whispering, "Thank you, thank you." It was real. She wasn't barren. She wasn't cursed. Her womb was alive. That evening, she joined her in-laws at dinner, her face glowing brighter than the chandeliers above the table. When she placed her hand casually on her stomach, her mother-in-law's sharp eyes narrowed. "Funk," the older woman said. "What is it?" Funk let the silence linger, savoring the moment, before speaking. "I'm pregnant." The room exploded. Gasps, cheers, prayers. Her mother-in-law's hands flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. "God is great," she cried. "At last. The family has an heir." Her husband, Femi, stared at her in stunned silence. His glass of wine froze halfway to his lips. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly, but he forced a smile as the table erupted in congratulations. Funk basked in their joy, but deep inside, a shadow flickered. For she knew the truth. And judging by the tightness in Femi's jaw, he knew it too. Later that night, as the mansion quieted, Funk stood by the window again, gazing at the iron gate below. Cunnel was there, his silhouette framed by the security light, standing tall and steady. She pressed her hand against her stomach, whispering into the darkness, "We did it." Behind her, Femi entered the room quietly. She turned, startled, to find him watching her with unreadable eyes. "You're pregnant," he said flatly. "Yes," she whispered, heart pounding. His gaze lingered on her, sharp and knowing. Then, without another word, he turned and left the room. Funk stood frozen, torn between triumph and terror. The house was silent again, but this time, the silence was not empty. It was heavy, dangerous, full of secrets waiting to explode. The house had never been louder. Since the announcement of her pregnancy, relatives and well-wishers streamed in daily, their voices filling the marble halls with laughter and prayers. The air was thick with celebration. Gifts piled in the living room, and pastors came to lay hands on her stomach, declaring her womb blessed. But amid the noise, Funk felt the silence of one man press heavier than all else. Her husband, Femi. He smiled when required, nodded when congratulated, played the role of proud father-to-be before others. But when the guests left, when the house quieted and they were alone, he spoke not a word to her. He would sit in the corner of their bedroom, scrolling through his phone, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. Funk would lie in bed, her hand on her swelling belly, pretending to sleep, while Femi's silence wrapped around her like a noose. Her mother-in-law transformed overnight. Where once there had been venom in her gaze, now there was pride. She visited daily, fussing over Funk's meals, demanding she rest, praying loudly in the living room for safe delivery. "You have saved this family, Funk," the older woman said one afternoon, her eyes wet with gratitude. "I doubted you, I admit. But look now, God has answered." Funk forced a smile, nodding politely. But inside, guilt twisted her like a knife. She wanted to scream, it wasn't God, it was Cunnel. Instead, she placed a hand on her belly and whispered the rehearsed line, "Yes, Mama. God is faithful." The hardest part was avoiding him. Cunnel remained at his post by the iron gates, but their eyes met more often now. When she walked in the garden, he would glance at her belly, a flicker of pride crossing his face. Late at night, when the mansion slept, she sometimes slipped quietly down the back stairs. Barefoot, she would cross the lawn, her heart pounding, and find him waiting in the small gatehouse. Their meetings had grown gentler since her pregnancy. Gone were the frantic collisions of bodies. Now it was tenderness, reverence. He would kneel before her, pressing his lips softly to her stomach, whispering, "My child, our child." Tears would sting her eyes at those words. She would stroke his hair, torn between joy and fear. "They can never know, Cunnel. If they find out." "I know," he would whisper, holding her tighter. But no matter what happens, this child is ours. Nothing can change that. But something had changed. One night, Funk returned from the gatehouse, her hair damp with sweat, her nightgown clinging to her skin. As she slipped into the bedroom, she froze. Femi was awake. He sat in the armchair by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes fixed on her. "You think I don't know?" he said quietly, his voice low and sharp. Funk's breath caught in her throat. "No, what?" He stood, placing the glass on the table. "You and him. The gate man." Her knees weakened, her hand flying instinctively to her stomach. "Femi, don't insult me with lies," he snapped. "I haven't touched you in years. Yet suddenly you're carrying a child? Do you think I am a fool?" Silence stretched between them, heavy, suffocating. Finally he spoke again, his tone colder. "Tell me the truth. Is it his?" Her lips trembled. She wanted to deny it, to save herself. But in that moment, she saw something in his eyes. A brokenness, a knowledge that ran deeper than anger. He already knew the truth. Funk lowered her gaze, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Yes." The word hung in the air like a blade. For a long time, Femi said nothing. He moved back to the armchair, poured himself another drink, and stared into the amber liquid. Finally he spoke. "No one must ever know. Not my mother. Not my family. Not the world. This child will be mine. Do you understand?" Funk's heart raced. "But—" He cut her off with a sharp look. "If the truth comes out, it will destroy us all. My mother will collapse. The press will devour us. This dynasty will crumble. That child will grow up branded a bastard." He drank deeply, then slammed the glass down. "I will not allow it." Funk's voice was barely a whisper. "What about Kunnel?" A thin smile curved Femi's lips. "I will take care of Kunnel." It was 2 nights later when Kunnel was summoned. He entered the mansion cautiously, his cap in his hands, his eyes darting nervously. Femi sat at the head of the study, flanked by 2 stern-faced men, family associates who moved like shadows, their silence more threatening than words. Funk stood in the corner, her heart pounding. Femi gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit." Kunnel obeyed, his jaw tight, his eyes flickering toward Funk. Femi leaned forward. "You know why you are here?" Kunnel swallowed. "Yes, sir. You laid with my wife. You planted your seed where it did not belong." His voice was calm, but venom laced every syllable. "Do you understand what you have done?" Kunnel's fists clenched on his knees. "I didn't force her. We both—" "Silence," Femi snapped, his voice like a whip. The room fell still. Funk's breath caught in her throat. Femi leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "I should destroy you. Ruin you. A man like you could vanish in this city and no one would ask questions." Kunnel's face tightened, but he said nothing. "But," Femi continued slowly, "I will not. Because I'm not a fool. Because I need this child." He signaled to one of the men, who placed a black leather briefcase on the table and clicked it open. Inside, neat stacks of naira filled the case, crisp and new. "Nigerian naira 20 million, Femi said flatly. "Enough to change your life. You will take it. You will leave Lagos. You will never contact my wife again. And you will never breathe a word of this to anyone." Kunnel's eyes widened. He looked at the money, then at Funk, then back at Femi. His chest rose and fell sharply. "And if I refuse?" Femi's smile was cold. He snapped his fingers. One of the silent men stepped forward, his presence heavy, dangerous. Kunnel understood. His jaw clenched, his eyes burning with both pride and pain. Finally, he spoke through gritted teeth. "Fine." The next night, Funk found him by the gate one last time. He was packing a small bag, his eyes red, his movements sharp with anger. "Kunnel," she whispered, tears choking her throat. He turned to her, his face hard, but his eyes softening when they fell on her belly. He stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her stomach. "Take care of him," he said quietly. Tell him I loved him, even if he never knows me." Her tears spilled freely now. She grabbed his hand, pressed it to her cheek. "I'm sorry. I didn't want this. I didn't want you to go." He kissed her forehead softly, lingering for a moment. Then he pulled away. Without another word, he walked through the iron gates, disappearing into the Lagos night. Funk's secret now breathes inside her, proof that she was never barren, proof that she could silence the whispers of Lagos society. But behind the polished gates of wealth, truth is a dangerous thing. Femi knows the child is not his, and Kunal, the gate man, is gone with a secret worth more than any fortune. The house is silent again, but it is no longer empty. It is heavy with lies, pride, and a child who may one day uncover the truth of his bloodline. Will Kunal return to claim what is his? What will happen when the boy begins to look less like a wealthy Lagos heir, and more like the gate man who once opened the doors of this mansion? And how long can Funk carry this secret before it destroys her? This was only part one of The Woman Without a Child. If you want to see what happens next, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and get ready for part 2. Because the truth has only just begun to unravel.